I raised my daughter for 15 years. Then I found out she wasn't mine, and she always knew.
I used to think that nothing could break me. I'd been through layoffs, sickness, even the death of my parents. And somehow I'd always found a way to keep standing. But all of that strength meant nothing the day I picked up my wife's phone and learned that the one person I'd loved most in the world, the little girl I'd raised since the day she was born, wasn't mine, and that she'd known it all along. It happened on a Sunday afternoon, the kind of quiet day when you're supposed to feel safe. My wife, Claire, had gone to the grocery store and left her phone on the kitchen counter. I was making coffee, half distracted, when it buzzed. A message popped up on the screen. Normally, I'd ignore it. We trusted each other, or at least I thought we did. But this one had my daughter's name on it. Emma, heart. I smiled automatically. She'd just turned 15, and lately she barely texted us unless she needed something. I expected a, "Can I go out?" or "Can you send money for lunch?" Instead, the preview made my hand freeze midair. "Mom, I can't keep pretending. He's not my dad, and I hate him." The world seemed to tilt. My first thought was that it had to be a misunderstanding. Maybe she was talking about someone else, a friend's father, some argument at school. I told myself not to read more, that it wasn't my business, but my fingers moved anyway, opening the chat like I was watching myself from outside my body. There it was, line after line of messages. My daughter's words, my little girl, written with a kind of raw contempt I didn't know she was capable of. "He tries so hard, it's pathetic. You should just tell him already. I can't stand it when he calls me his princess." And then Claire's reply, "Please, Emma, don't say things like that. He's done everything for you. He loves you more than anyone. But he's not my dad. He doesn't need to know that. It would destroy him." I don't remember sitting down, but I must have, because suddenly I was on the kitchen floor with the phone in my hand, the coffee burning on the stove. I kept scrolling, even when every word cut deeper. They'd known for years. Years. There were older messages too, Emma asking who her real father was, Claire dodging, saying it didn't matter, saying she'd made a mistake before she met me, but that I was the one who'd raised her, and that should be enough. Enough. That word stuck in my head like a nail. I didn't know how long I sat there, staring at the screen, but by the time Claire came back, the coffee had turned to sludge. She walked in humming, carrying grocery bags, and stopped when she saw me holding her phone. Her face went white. "What are you doing?" I didn't answer. I just handed her the phone. She looked down, saw the open chat, and for a second everything in her face collapsed. The mask, the calm, the lies. "Please," she whispered, "let me explain." "Explain what?" I said, my voice shaking. "That my daughter, our daughter, isn't mine? That you both knew?" "She's still your daughter," she said, stepping closer, hands trembling. "She raised her. You love her." I backed away. "And she hates me." "She doesn't hate you," Claire said, crying now. "She's just angry, confused." She called me pathetic. She said she can't stand it when I call her my princess. She covered her face with her hands. "She didn't mean it." I laughed, a sound I didn't recognize. "You've been lying to me for 15 years. "It wasn't supposed to be like this," she said, her voice breaking. "It was a mistake, a one-night thing before we got serious. I found out later, and I didn't know how to tell you. Then you fell in love with her, and I thought, what difference would it make? You were her father in every way that mattered." Every way that mattered. Another knife disguised as comfort. I couldn't look at her. I couldn't look at anything. My eyes fell on the family photos on the wall. Birthdays, vacations, Christmas mornings. All of them suddenly felt like someone else's life. I told her. She knew, Claire. Our daughter knew, and she didn't say a word. Do you know what that means? Claire reached for me, but I stepped back. "Please," she whispered, "don't leave. We can fix this. You're her dad. You always will be." I wanted to scream, but the air in my lungs had turned to concrete. I walked past her, out the door, into the cold air. I could hear her calling after me, but I just kept walking, each step heavier than the last. By the time I reached the park at the end of our street, I realized my hands were shaking so badly I dropped my keys somewhere along the way. My whole body felt hollow. I sat on a bench under the bare trees, trying to breathe. Every sound, kids playing, dogs barking, felt distant, like I was underwater. 15 years. 15 years of bedtime stories, scraped knees, school plays, birthday cakes. Every moment I'd held her hand and thought, this is my daughter. And now all I could think about was how many times she must have looked at me knowing the truth, knowing I was just some fool raising another man's child. I didn't go home that night. I sat there until the sun went down, until the park emptied, until the cold seeped through my bones, and I stopped feeling anything at all.
I spent that night in my car parked outside a closed gas station, staring at the dashboard until the numbers on the clock stopped meaning anything. The only light came from a flickering street lamp that buzzed like a trapped fly. I couldn't sleep, couldn't think, couldn't stop replaying those messages. Every sentence I'd read twisted again and again in my mind until they didn't sound like words anymore, but like cracks splitting through something inside me. When the sun finally rose, I drove home, though I don't remember deciding to. The house looked different, smaller, as if it was shrinking away from me. Claire was on the porch waiting. Her face was pale, her eyes red from crying, but she still tried to smile when she saw me. I didn't say a word. She started talking before I even reached the steps, her voice fast, desperate, trying to fill the silence between us. "I was going to tell you," she said. "I wanted to so many times, but every time I looked at you with her, I couldn't. You were so happy. I didn't want to ruin it." I just stared at her. "You didn't ruin it," I said finally. "You replaced it with something fake." She started to reach out, but stopped halfway, her hand trembling in the cold morning air. "It doesn't change what you are to her," she said. "You're still her father." I laughed softly. "She doesn't see it that way." I walked past her, into the house that suddenly smelled of dust and lies. Every picture frame, every note stuck to the fridge felt poisoned. I went to the living room and sat on the couch. Emma's school bag was on the floor where she'd dropped it the day before. For a moment I almost called her name, then remembered she wouldn't answer me the same way again. When she finally came downstairs, she didn't look surprised to see me. That hurt more than anything. She knew her mother had told me, or maybe she'd guessed. She stopped at the bottom step and crossed her arms. "Mom said you found out," she said. Her voice wasn't cruel exactly, just cold, detached. I looked at her and tried to find the child who used to run into my arms when I came home from work, but she wasn't there. "Yeah," I said quietly. "I found out." She looked at the floor, then at me, like she was waiting for me to yell or break something. I didn't. I just said, "How long have you known?" She shrugged, and that shrug felt like a punch to the chest. "Since I was about 10, maybe 11. Mom told me when I started asking why I didn't look like you." I swallowed hard. "And all this time you couldn't tell me?" She didn't answer right away. "I thought you knew," she said finally. And that was a lie so thin it almost wasn't even an attempt. I shook my head. "You thought I knew? Emma, I built my life around you. Every decision I ever made was for you." She looked away, eyes glossy. "I didn't ask you to." That sentence broke something. I stood there staring at her, trying to breathe through it, trying not to say the things I wanted to say, the things I knew would never leave her memory if I did. She looked so much like Claire in that moment, same sharp eyes, same defensive tone, that I didn't trust myself to speak. I turned and walked out into the backyard instead, into the brittle morning air that smelled like frost and damp earth. My hands were shaking again. Claire followed me out a minute later, her voice trembling. "Please, she's just confused. She didn't mean it." "Don't," I said. "Don't make excuses for her. You did enough of that for yourself." She started to cry again, quiet this time, the kind of crying that comes from exhaustion rather than guilt. For the next few days, the house felt like a graveyard. We barely spoke. Emma stayed in her room, headphones on, pretending schoolwork mattered more than the wreckage downstairs. I slept on the couch, if you could call it sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that message on the screen, the one that began everything. He's not my dad, and I hate him. It was like a brand burned into my mind. I kept wondering when that hate had started. Was it something I'd said? Something I did wrong without realizing? Or was it just the truth itself, that she'd known she didn't belong to me and resented me for pretending otherwise? On the third night, I heard her door open quietly. I didn't move, pretending to be asleep, but she stood there for a moment, maybe watching me, maybe deciding whether to say something. Then she went back upstairs without a word. That silence said everything. A week later, I went to see a lawyer. I didn't know what I wanted: divorce, custody, answers, but I needed something solid to hold on to. The lawyer listened, calm and patient, and finally said, "Legally, you're her father. You're on the birth certificate. You've raised her. That means you have rights." I nodded, though the word father felt like a cruel joke now. Rights don't make love real. He didn't argue. That night, I sat in the dark with a photo album open on my lap. Emma's baby pictures, her first day of school, her first lost tooth, all the little milestones that now felt stolen. But the smile in those pictures was real, wasn't it? The way she clung to me when she was scared, the way she cried for me when she fell off her bike. Those moments had been genuine, even if built on a lie. I told myself that over and over, but the truth kept whispering back. She knew. She knew and still let me believe. I didn't confront her again for a long time. What was there left to say? I just kept going through the motions: work, bills, dinners eaten in silence. But underneath, something cold had taken root. I wasn't angry all the time anymore. I was empty. Claire tried to talk sometimes, said we could go to therapy, that families survive worse. I almost laughed at that, because once the truth gets out, it doesn't destroy everything all at once. It just hollows it out slowly, until one day you realize there's nothing left but a house full of ghosts who still call each other family.
Days turned into weeks, and everything between us became mechanical, stripped of warmth or rhythm. The three of us moved through the same rooms like strangers forced to share space, the sound of our footsteps the only conversation left. I still made breakfast in the mornings, out of habit, though nobody joined me anymore. Claire started sleeping in the guest room. She said it was to give me space, but I knew she just couldn't stand the silence. Emma avoided me completely, slipping out early for school, coming home late, shutting her door like a final verdict. The house smelled like her perfume and Claire's shampoo, and yet somehow like nothing at all. Just stale air and memory. I told myself I'd get used to it, that time would dull the edge. But it didn't. It just changed the pain into something heavier, quieter. I started working longer hours just to stay out of the house. My boss didn't ask questions. He probably thought I needed the overtime. Maybe I did. Anything to avoid coming home to a place that felt less like home every day. But you can't outrun your own thoughts. They find you anyway. On the drive home, in the aisles of the grocery store, in the reflection of a window when you catch a glimpse of a man who looks exactly like you, but older, emptier. Every time I saw a father with his daughter, laughter easy and unforced, something twisted in me. I wondered if people could see it, the hollow in my chest where love used to live. One night, I came home late and found Claire sitting at the kitchen table with a glass of wine. She looked exhausted, hair tied back, eyes puffy. "We need to talk," she said, and I almost laughed because that phrase had become meaningless. "About what?" I asked. "About us," she said. "About Emma." I sat down across from her, keeping my distance. "There is no us anymore," I said. "And Emma doesn't want anything to do with me." Claire's eyes filled with tears again, but I was too numb to care. "She's still a kid," she said. "She doesn't understand what she's saying." I shook my head. "She understands enough to hate me." Claire reached across the table. "She doesn't hate you. She's scared. She thinks you'll leave." I met her gaze. Maybe I should have. She went quiet. The only sound was the hum of the refrigerator. Finally, she said, "I told her the truth because she kept asking why she didn't look like you. I thought it would be better coming from me than from someone else." I laughed softly. "You mean you thought you could control the fallout?" She flinched. "I thought I could protect both of you," she said. "You didn't protect anyone," I said. "You just built a lie big enough for all of us to drown in." She started crying again, quiet sobs she tried to hide behind her hands. But I'd run out of sympathy. I stood up, pushed the chair back, and said, "I'm done talking about this." That night, I packed a bag. Not everything, just enough to leave for a few days. When I walked past Emma's room, her light was still on. I hesitated, hand hovering near the door, wanting to say something, anything. But then I heard music playing softly inside, and beneath it, her voice, laughing, not with me, but with someone on the phone. A sound that used to make me happy now felt like someone else's memory. I walked away. I stayed in a cheap motel on the edge of town, the kind of place that smells like bleach and loneliness. I thought I'd feel relief, but the first night, I couldn't sleep. The silence there was worse than at home because it had no history attached to it. No ghosts, no echoes, just emptiness. I lay awake staring at the ceiling, thinking about Emma as a toddler, how she used to crawl into bed with us after nightmares, her tiny hand gripping my arm. She'd whisper, "Don't let the monsters get me." I'd always tell her, "They never will, not while I'm here." And now I realized the monster had been sitting at the kitchen table all along, smiling at me over years of breakfasts and birthdays. By the third day, I went back home. I didn't tell Claire I was coming. She was in the garden when I pulled up, kneeling by the flower beds, pretending not to notice the weeds. She looked up when she heard the car door close and froze. "You came back," she said softly. I nodded, not sure why, maybe because running away felt like surrender, and I already lost enough. I went inside, without saying more. The house smelled the same. Emma's shoes were by the door, her backpack on the couch. She was home. I heard voices upstairs, hers and Claire's, low and tense. I couldn't make out the words, just the tone, sharp, defensive. Then Emma's door slammed. Claire came down a few minutes later, wiping her hands on her jeans. She said she's angry again. "About what?" I asked. "About you," she said. "She says it's awkward when you're around." Something inside me snapped. "It's awkward for her," I said, voice rising. "I'm the one who's been lied to for half my life, and she's uncomfortable?" Claire flinched. "Please don't yell," she said. "She can hear you." I didn't care. "Good," I said. "Maybe she should." I turned towards the stairs, but Claire stepped in front of me. "Don't," she said. "You'll just make it worse." I stopped, breathing hard, and realized she was right. I sat down instead, my hand shaking. "I don't know how to do this anymore," I said quietly. Claire knelt beside me. "You just keep being her dad. That's all you can do." I looked at her and almost said, "I'm not her dad." But the words caught in my throat. Saying it out loud would make it real in a way it hadn't been yet. That night, Emma didn't come downstairs for dinner. I left a plate for her anyway. Later, when I checked, it was still untouched. I scraped it into the trash and watched the food slide off the plate, realizing how symbolic that was. 15 years of love, scraped away in silence. I stood there in the dim kitchen, staring at the empty plate, and thought, maybe this is what dying feels like. Not quick, not dramatic, just the slow realization that the people you'd give your life for stopped seeing you a long time ago.
Weeks went by like water leaking through my hands, steady and unstoppable. The routine stayed the same, but meant nothing now. Breakfast was silence, dinner was avoidance, and the spaces between were just empty noise. Emma barely looked at me anymore. When she did, it was with that mix of pity and annoyance teenagers give their parents, except now it carried something colder, contempt. It wasn't the sharp anger of rebellion, it was a quiet dismissal, as if she decided that I no longer mattered. Every time she walked past me without saying a word, I felt like I was fading a little more. Claire pretended we were healing. She'd leave self-help books on the counter about forgiveness and family therapy, trying to fix something that wasn't broken but dead. I'd watch her read them, nodding to herself, and wonder if she truly believed that time could make this right, or if she just needed to believe in something. I didn't. One Saturday morning, I heard Emma laughing outside. That sound, God, it used to be everything to me. I looked through the window and saw her leaning against the fence, talking to some boy from school, smiling like she used to when she was little. For a second, instinct kicked in. I wanted to walk out there, make small talk, ask his name, play the protective dad. Then I remembered what she'd said in those texts. He's not my dad, so I stayed behind the glass, invisible, watching my own life move on without me. Later that night, Claire tried to talk again. You need to speak to her, she said. Ignoring it won't help. I almost laughed. She doesn't want to talk to me. You don't know that, she said, her voice soft but desperate. You've been her father her whole life. She's just confused. She's not confused, I said. She knows exactly what she feels, and it's not love. Claire flinched. She's 15. Teenagers say cruel things they don't mean. I shook my head. She didn't just say it, Claire. She lived it. She's been looking at me like a stranger for years, and now I finally know why. I started sleeping in the basement a few days later. I told Claire it was because I snored, but really I just couldn't stand being in the same bed with someone who'd lied to me for half my life. Down there, surrounded by old boxes and the hum of the furnace, I could almost pretend I was someone else. A man without a past, without betrayal. I found some of Emma's old drawings in a box. Stick figures of us holding hands, crooked hearts with Dad scrawled above my head in pink marker. I sat there for a long time staring at them, remembering the nights she used to bring me her art, beaming, asking me to hang it on the fridge. Now those same pictures felt like museum pieces from another world. One evening I came home from work and found a note on the fridge. Gone to a friend's house, back late, -E. Claire was at the table, staring at her phone. She looked up when I walked in. She's staying with Melissa tonight, she said, but there was something in her tone that didn't sound right. You sure? I asked. She hesitated a little too long. Yes. That pause sat heavy in the air. I went upstairs, opened Emma's door, and saw her backpack gone, some clothes missing, but not enough for just one night. My stomach dropped. I came back down. Where is she really? She said she needed space, maybe with her biological father. She stopped herself too late. I froze. Her what? Claire swallowed hard. He reached out last month just to talk. I didn't tell you because I knew you'd what? React like a father? I could barely keep my voice steady. You let her meet him? She wanted to. She's been curious for years. I didn't think it would hurt. I slammed my hand against the counter, the sound echoing through the kitchen. Didn't think it would hurt. Claire, every single thing you've done has hurt. She started crying again, the same tears that no longer meant anything. I grabbed my keys and left before I said something worse. I didn't know where to go, so I drove aimlessly, roads blurring past until I found myself near the park where I'd first learned the truth. I parked, turned off the engine, and sat there staring at the empty swing swaying in the wind. It felt fitting. Everything moving, creaking, but going nowhere. I tried calling Emma, but she didn't answer. Texted her, no reply. For hours, I sat there in the dark until finally a message came through. Stop calling me. I'm fine. I'm with people who actually care about me. Those words gutted me. I wanted to scream, but there was no sound left in me. Only silence. I drove home at dawn, every mile heavier than the last. Claire was waiting by the window, pale and shaking. Did you find her? She asked. I didn't answer. I just walked past her, into the house that no longer felt like mine, into the life I no longer recognized. That morning I realized something I'd been refusing to face. The truth hadn't just stolen my daughter, it had erased the person I'd been. The father, the husband, the man who believed in love built on trust. All of that was gone. What was left was someone I didn't know, someone sitting in his own living room surrounded by ghosts waiting for a daughter who might never come home. 3 days passed before I heard anything from her again. Claire told me not to push, that Emma needed space, but space was just another word for distance, and we already had too much of that. Every hour without a message stretched like a lifetime. I checked my phone constantly, scrolled through old pictures, watched videos of her birthdays, of me lifting her onto my shoulders during fireworks, her laughter echoing over the sound of the crowd. That laugh used to make every hard day worth it. Now it just felt like a recording from someone else's life. On the 4th morning, a text arrived. "Don't worry, I'm fine. Please stop involving Mom." No dad, not even my name, just that flat, cold line. I typed a dozen replies and deleted them all. There was nothing I could say that wouldn't push her further away. Claire kept pacing the house like a ghost. "She'll come back," she said over and over, as if repeating it could make it true. But even she didn't sound convinced. I caught her crying in the laundry room one night, her shoulders shaking silently. I wanted to hate her, but I couldn't. Hatred takes energy, and I had none left. What I felt was emptiness, like someone had hollowed me out and left me walking around pretending to be alive. A week later, the doorbell rang. It was Emma. She stood there in a hoodie, hair messy, eyes red from crying or lack of sleep. For a second, I didn't recognize her. She looked older, sharper, harder. I wanted to pull her into a hug, but she stepped back when I moved closer. "I just came for my stuff," she said. Her voice was steady, but her eyes flickered when she said it. Claire came running from the kitchen, half whispering, "Emma, thank God." But she ignored her and went straight upstairs. I stood frozen at the bottom of the staircase, listening to drawers open and close, hangers clattering, the sound of her life being packed into bags. When she came down, she paused at the front door, her hand on the knob. I said her name quietly. She didn't look at me. "Where are you going to stay?" I asked. "With friends. Maybe for a while." "Does he know?" I asked before I could stop myself. She turned sharply, eyes like knives. "Don't call him that. He's my father." The air went out of me. I just nodded. She walked out, the door closing softly behind her. That night, I sat at the kitchen table long after Claire went to bed, staring at the empty doorway, waiting for her to come back even though I knew she wouldn't. The house was so quiet that I could hear the clock ticking in the hall. Each click felt like a countdown to something I couldn't name. Around midnight, Claire came down and sat across from me. Her voice was hoarse when she said, "You have to understand, she's angry, she's confused, she'll see eventually who's always been there for her." I looked at her and said, "She already knows who's been there, she just doesn't care." Claire started to speak, but I stood up and walked away before she could. The days that followed blurred together. I went to work, came home, sat in silence. Sometimes I'd see a text from Claire on my phone saying Emma had checked in, that she was safe. I'd type "good" and send it because I didn't know what else to say. Every part of me wanted to fight for her, to drag her back home and remind her of everything we'd shared. But love can't survive without truth, and the truth had already scorched everything between us. One afternoon, I drove past the old playground where I used to take her when she was small. The swings were empty, the paint chipped, the slide rusted. I parked and sat there, watching the wind push the chains back and forth. That was where she'd first called me Dad. I could still hear her voice saying it, soft and proud, like she'd invented the word herself. I wondered what she called him now, the man whose DNA she shared, but whose face she hadn't seen until recently. Did she look at him and see something of herself, something I could never give her? Did she laugh with him the way she used to laugh with me? Those questions had no answers, but they tore through me anyway. That evening, I came home to find Claire sitting with a pile of old photographs spread across the table. She was going to throw them out, she said quietly, but I couldn't. I looked at the pictures, Emma as a baby in my arms, the three of us at the beach, Christmas mornings with wrapping paper everywhere. I said, "You should keep them. They're yours." She looked up at me, eyes full of something between guilt and longing. "They're yours too," she said. I shook my head. "No, they were never really mine. I was just borrowing them. She started to cry again, but I didn't have the strength to comfort her. That night, I dreamed of Emma. She was little again, sitting on my shoulders, pointing at the stars, saying, "That one's ours, Daddy." When I woke up, the pillow was wet, and for the first time in years, I realized I had been crying in my sleep. I sat up and whispered into the dark, "It was always yours, kiddo, even if I never was."
Time stopped having shape. Days bled into nights and back again without warning. Work became the only rhythm I could cling to, the one place where nobody knew my story, where I could just be another man with tired eyes and a wedding ring he didn't take off even though it had stopped meaning anything. At home, the silence stretched wider. Claire tried to fill it with chores, gardening, cooking dinners neither of us ate. Every plate left untouched felt like another piece of proof that our family existed only in habit. Emma called less and less, and when she did, it was only to speak to her mother. I'd hear Claire whispering softly in the other room, saying, "Of course, honey. Be careful. I love you." And when she hung up, the look in her eyes told me she knew better than to repeat what Emma said about me. One evening, I came home to find a small envelope on the kitchen table with my name written in Emma's handwriting. My heart stuttered. For a moment, I thought it was a letter, maybe an apology, maybe something that would explain everything. I tore it open, hands shaking. Inside was a single folded page. "I need to move on. Please stop trying. I'm happy where I am. I hope you can be too someday." That was it. No love, no signature, just those words, clean and final. I stared at it for a long time before setting it down next to the salt shaker. When Claire came in, she saw the paper and froze. "Did she write you?" she asked quietly. I nodded. "What did she say?" I handed her the letter. She read it once, pressed her lips together, and then folded it neatly again, like she was afraid of breaking it. "She doesn't mean it," she said. "She's just hurting." I wanted to believe that, but lies taste different after you've lived with them for 15 years. I said nothing. That night, after Claire went to bed, I sat outside on the back porch with a beer and watched the yard fade into darkness. I thought about the years I'd spent teaching Emma how to ride a bike, how to fish, how to stand up for herself. I remembered the day she'd come home crying because a boy in her class had called her names, and how I told her she was stronger than any of them knew. Back then, I believed it was my job to protect her from every cruel thing the world could throw her way. I never imagined that one day the cruelest thing would come from the truth itself. The wind picked up, shaking the trees, scattering dead leaves across the grass. I whispered to no one, "You were mine, even if I wasn't yours," and watched the breath vanish into the cold. Weeks later, Claire suggested therapy. "You can't keep carrying this alone," she said. "Maybe talking to someone will help." I almost laughed. "You mean talking about how my daughter hates me and my wife lied to me? Sounds like a good time." But she didn't argue. She just nodded. And somehow that made me feel worse. The next day, I went anyway. The therapist's office smelled like lavender and paper. She listened while I told the whole story, nodding in that quiet way therapists do when they're holding space for something they can't fix. When I finished, she asked, "What do you want, really?" The question caught me off guard. Nobody had asked me that since the truth came out. I thought for a long time, and finally said, "I want to stop waking up with this feeling that my life ended without me noticing." She wrote something down, then said, "Maybe it didn't end. Maybe it just changed shape." I didn't know whether to laugh or cry, so I did neither. A few days later, I saw Emma. By accident. I was coming out of a hardware store when I noticed her across the street, standing beside a man I recognized immediately, even though I'd never seen him before. Tall, dark-haired, the same jawline as hers. Her biological father. They were laughing about something, light and easy,
like I used to with her before everything fell apart. She noticed me then. Our eyes met for half a second, just long enough for me to see the flicker of recognition, the sudden tension in her smile. And then she looked away, grabbed the man's arm, and walked off. I stood there on the sidewalk feeling every part of myself collapse, quietly, inside. That night, I didn't tell Claire what I'd seen. What was the point? She was already a shadow in her own house, moving carefully, afraid of setting off another memory. We barely touched, barely spoke. The only time our voices met was when bills needed paying, or groceries ran out. We lived like polite strangers, keeping each other's ghosts company. But something shifted in me after that day. The anger that had been burning for months started to cool into something quieter, something almost like understanding. I realized I couldn't make Emma love me again. I couldn't make her forget or rewrite her truth. Maybe all I could do was let her go and hope that somewhere down the line she'd remember not the lies that built her childhood, but the love that filled it. Maybe that would be enough. So I began clearing out her room. Not to erase her, but to stop living in a shrine to what used to be. I folded her clothes into boxes, packed her trophies, stacked her books neatly. In one drawer, I found a photo strip from a fair years ago, the two of us making faces in a booth, both laughing uncontrollably, her tiny hand on my cheek. I stared at it for a long time before sliding it into my wallet. It felt right to keep at least one proof that once, for a moment, everything had been real. By winter, the house was quieter but lighter. I started walking in the mornings before work, breathing in the cold air, feeling almost like peace. Claire and I spoke less, but fought less too, which felt like progress in its own way. One morning, she stopped me before I left and said, "You know she'll come back someday." I looked at her and said, "Maybe. But if she does, I hope it's because she wants to, not because she feels she should." That night, I took the letter Emma had left and read it one last time. Then I tore it into small pieces, carried them outside, and let the wind scatter them into the dark. I didn't feel free, not really, but for the first time in years, I didn't feel trapped either.
Spring came quietly that year, like it was afraid to disturb the ruins of what had been left behind. The snow melted from the yard, the grass pushed through in thin patches of green, and for the first time in months, sunlight actually reached the corners of the house that had lived too long in shadows. Claire started planting flowers again. She didn't say anything about it, just went outside one morning with gloves and a shovel, kneeling in the dirt like she was trying to apologize to the earth itself. I watched her from the window for a while before going out to help, though we didn't speak. We just worked side by side, silent. The sound of soil and wind saying everything that words couldn't. When we were done, we stood looking at the garden. Neat rows, new beginnings, but it didn't feel like peace, just the first step after too much stillness. I didn't expect to hear from Emma again, but one afternoon, my phone buzzed with a number I didn't recognize. The message was simple. "Hi." For a long moment, I couldn't even breathe. Then another came. "Mom said you're doing okay." I didn't know what to say back. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, typing and deleting, until finally I just wrote, "I'm trying." She didn't reply for hours, and I told myself that was fine. That even one word was more than I'd hoped for. But later that night, another message came. "Can we talk?" I didn't tell Claire. Some things needed to belong only to me now. I drove to the cafe downtown where Emma said she wanted to meet. I got there early, sat at a corner table, staring at the door like a man waiting for a ghost. When she finally walked in, my heart did something I hadn't felt in months. It hurt, but in a way that meant I was still alive. She looked older somehow, sharper around the edges, but still the same girl I'd carried on my shoulders. The same eyes I used to see staring up at me from bedtime stories. She sat down carefully, like she wasn't sure if she was allowed to. "Hi," she said again. "Hi," I managed to say. For a minute, we just sat there, the air thick with everything we weren't saying. Finally, she looked down at her cup and said, "I shouldn't have said what I said in those messages. I didn't mean all of it." My throat tightened. "You meant enough of it," I said softly. She flinched. "I was angry. I didn't know how to handle it. Mom told me everything at once, and I didn't know what to do with it. I felt like my whole life was fake." I nodded slowly. "I know the feeling." She looked up then, eyes wet but steady. "I didn't hate you. I just didn't know how to love you after I found out." Those words hit harder than anything else, because I understood them completely. I get it. I really do. We talked for nearly an hour. She told me she'd been living with a friend's family, that she'd met her biological father a few times, but it hadn't been what she expected. "He's nice, but it's weird," she said. "It feels like I'm talking to a stranger who happens to look like me." I wanted to tell her that's exactly what it felt like for me now, looking at her, hearing her voice, but I didn't. Instead, I said, "You'll figure out what feels right. Just don't shut out the people who've always been there for you, even if we made mistakes." She nodded, eyes down. "I don't know what I want yet," she whispered. "I just know I don't want to hate you anymore." I smiled. Small, tired, but real. That's a good start. When we left, she gave me a quick hug. It was awkward and hesitant, but it was more than I dared to dream of. Watching her walk away down the street, I felt something shift inside me. Not healing exactly, but something close. A crack letting the light back in. That night, Claire noticed the change in me. "You saw her," she said. I didn't even have to answer. She could see it in my face. "How was it?" she asked. "Better than I deserved." In the weeks that followed, Emma started texting me every now and then. Small things. Photos of the dog we used to have, questions about how to fix her car, a meme she thought I'd like. Nothing deep, nothing heavy. But every message felt like a bridge being rebuilt, plank by plank. I didn't rush it. I didn't push. I just answered every time, even when the words were simple. "Proud of you. Drive safe. You'll figure it out." One evening, she sent a picture of the sunset from her apartment window, a caption underneath. "Reminded me of when we used to sit on the roof and watch these." I stared at that photo for a long time before replying, "I still watch them. Some things don't change." That night, for the first time in years, I slept without waking.
The messages became more frequent after that. Small threads of connection, slowly weaving themselves back into something that almost felt like family. She'd text about her classes, her friends, a movie she'd watched, or ask about the old dog we used to have, forgetting for a moment that he died years ago. I answered everything gently, never asking too much, never pushing for more. Every reply from her was like oxygen after too long underwater. Claire noticed but didn't interfere. She just smiled faintly whenever she saw my phone light up. I think she knew this was the one thing that could still make me feel human again. Some nights, I'd sit by the window scrolling through those short conversations, rereading them until I memorized every word. It wasn't love the way it used to be, but it was something. A truce, maybe, or a slow rebuilding of trust through silence and distance. Then, out of nowhere, Emma called me. Hearing her voice again almost undid me. It was the middle of the night, her tone quiet, uncertain. "Sorry it's late," she said. "I didn't know who else to call." My heart dropped. "What's wrong?" I asked. She hesitated, and I heard traffic in the background. "I had a fight with Mom. She told me I was being selfish for not coming home more. I just needed to get away for a bit. I grabbed my keys before she even finished. "Where are you?" I asked. "At the gas station near Ridge Road," she said. "Can you come?" 10 minutes later, I pulled up and saw her sitting on the curb, arms wrapped around her knees. She looked small again, like she did when she was a child afraid of thunderstorms. I didn't say anything, just opened the passenger door. She got in silently, and we drove. After a few miles, she said, "You didn't have to come." "Of course I did. That's what dads do." She didn't respond right away. Then she whispered, "I know." Those 2 words were so soft I almost thought I imagined them, but they were real. We drove until the city lights disappeared and the dark fields spread out around us. I stopped near an overlook we used to visit when she was younger. The same spot where we'd once watched fireworks, where she'd fallen asleep in my lap. The stars were faint but clear. We sat there in silence for a while before she finally said, "He's not what I thought he'd be." I didn't ask who. She didn't need to say it. "He's distant, kind, but not really there, like he doesn't know what to do with me." I kept my eyes on the horizon. Sometimes biology doesn't make a person a father. Being there does. She turned toward me, her voice shaking a little. "You were always there. I just didn't see it." I swallowed hard. "You were a kid. You saw what you needed to see." "No," she said. "I saw what Mom wanted me to see. I thought keeping the truth meant she was protecting me, but really she was protecting herself. I should have told you I knew. I should have said something." I shook my head. "You were just trying to survive it. So was I." We stayed like that for a long time. Not father and daughter, not strangers, but 2 people standing in the same wreckage, realizing it didn't have to bury them anymore. Eventually, I started the car and drove her home. When we stopped outside her apartment, she turned to me and said, "I don't know if I'll ever figure all this out, but thank you for not giving up on me." I smiled, barely able to speak. "I don't know how to stop." She leaned over and hugged me. Not the awkward, hesitant touch from the cafe, but something real, tight, trembling. It only lasted a few seconds, but I could have lived in those seconds forever. After she went inside, I sat in the car until sunrise. For the first time since that night I found the messages, I felt something like peace. Not because everything was fixed, it never would be, but because she'd reached out, because she'd let me be her dad again, even if only for a night. When I got home, Claire was awake, waiting on the couch. She didn't ask where I'd been, she already knew. I told her Emma was okay, that she just needed space. Claire nodded and said softly, "She needed her father." I looked at her, searching for bitterness, but there was none. Only quiet acceptance. "Maybe she finally found him," she said. "Maybe," I answered. After that, something shifted between Claire and me too. We still didn't talk about forgiveness, didn't call it love anymore, but we existed side by side without the poison that used to fill the air. Sometimes, late at night, she'd leave the porch light on just in case Emma ever came home again. And sometimes, when I walked past her room and saw the glow spilling down the hallway, I'd imagine Emma's footsteps on the stairs, her voice calling, "Dad!" It never came. But somehow, I didn't need it to. Because I knew, wherever she was, whatever she was doing, she remembered that night under the stars. And maybe for her, that was enough.
Months passed, quieter this time, like life was slowly stitching itself back together with thin, invisible thread. Emma didn't move back home, but she called every few weeks, sometimes just to talk, sometimes to ask advice about things that didn't really matter. How to fix a leaky faucet, what kind of oil to use in her car, how to tell if chicken was cooked enough. I answered every question like it was the most important thing in the world, because to me, it was. Every call meant she still trusted me with something, even if it wasn't love in the same way as before. Claire always asked how she sounded, whether she seemed happy. I'd tell her yes, and sometimes it was even true. Other times I could hear something cracked behind Emma's words. The same kind of exhaustion I used to feel when I was pretending to be okay. But I never pushed. You can't force healing. You just have to stand close enough that they can reach for you when they're ready. In early summer, she invited me to her school recital. It wasn't a big event, just a local thing her music class was doing, but it felt like a milestone. I sat in the back of the auditorium, heart pounding like I was the one performing. She walked onto the stage with her guitar, wearing the same shy smile she used to have before school plays when she was small. When she started playing, I felt something twist deep in my chest. It wasn't sadness exactly. It was everything at once. Grief, pride, regret, love. She didn't look at me once during the song, but when she finished, her eyes found mine in the crowd, and for a fleeting moment, she smiled. It was small, almost hesitant, but it was real. I clapped until my hands hurt. After the show, she came up to me in the parking lot, holding her guitar case like a shield. "Thanks for coming," she said softly. "Wouldn't have missed it for the world," I answered. There was a long pause, where neither of us knew what to say next. Then she said, "I know I haven't been fair to you. I didn't know how to handle any of it." I nodded. "You don't owe me an apology, Emma." She looked down at her shoes. "I think I do." Her voice cracked. "You were there for everything. Every birthday, every scraped knee, every time I failed. And I made you feel like none of that mattered." I swallowed hard. It all mattered. Still does. She looked up then, her eyes shining with something I hadn't seen in a long time. Trust. "Can we start over?" she whispered. I wanted to say yes, immediately, but something in me knew that starting over didn't mean pretending nothing happened. It meant carrying the weight of it together. So I said, "We can try." She smiled, and for the first time since the truth came out, I felt like maybe trying was enough. After that, she started visiting the house again. At first, just short stops, dropping by for coffee, picking up old clothes she'd left behind, sitting in the garden with Claire without saying much. But each time she stayed a little longer. The house felt alive again when she was there. Even the air changed, like it remembered how to breathe. I found myself fixing things that hadn't mattered in years. The squeaky door hinge, the loose step on the porch, the cracked frame of her childhood photo still hanging in the hallway. Every nail, every brushstroke felt like a small piece of redemption. One afternoon, she helped me clean the garage. Dust motes danced in sunlight while we sorted through boxes of old tools and half-forgotten memories. She found the wooden birdhouse we'd built together when she was 7. The paint was chipped, the roof crooked, but it was still intact. She turned it over in her hands and said, "You kept it." "Of course," I said. "We made it." She smiled then, the kind of smile that didn't need words. We hung it back up outside that evening, right under the old oak tree. For a long moment, we just stood there, side by side, watching it sway in the wind. That night, after she left, Claire sat beside me on the porch. She said, "You did it." I shook my head. "No, she did." Claire leaned her head on my shoulder. "Maybe both of you did." I didn't answer, but for once the silence between us didn't hurt. It felt earned. In the following weeks, things didn't magically fix themselves. There were still moments when Emma pulled away, still days when the weight of the past sat heavy on my chest, but there was also laughter again, small, hesitant, but growing. And sometimes that's enough. Sometimes you don't get to rebuild what you lost. You just learn to live with the cracks, and if you're lucky, the light finds its way through them. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the trees, Emma texted me, Thanks for never walking away." I stared at the words for a long time before replying, "That's not what dads do."
That summer felt different, like life had shifted into a slower, steadier rhythm. I still woke some mornings with the same heaviness in my chest, the kind that doesn't go away just because things are better. But there were moments, brief, quiet ones, when I almost forgot the pain. Emma visited often, sometimes bringing her guitar, sometimes just showing up unannounced, leaning against the door frame and saying, "You got any coffee?" like she hadn't once wished me out of her life. Every time she did, a part of me healed a little more. Claire kept her distance during those visits, giving us space, and I appreciated that. The air between us was no longer filled with blame, just a kind of mutual exhaustion that made peace easier than anger. One evening, Emma came over after work, tired but smiling. We sat on the porch with 2 mugs of coffee, watching the sun slip below the trees. She was telling me about her job, about how her boss drove her crazy, and then out of nowhere she said, "He's moving." I turned to her. "Who?" She hesitated. "My biological father? He got a job out west, said I could visit if I wanted." The words hit me like a quiet echo from a life that didn't belong to me anymore. "Do you want to?" I asked. She stared into her cup for a long time. "I thought I did," she said softly. "But when I saw him last week, it felt empty. Like I was forcing something that isn't there." I didn't say anything at first. I just let her talk. "He's a good man," she continued. "I can tell he's trying, but it's not the same. It's not you." My throat tightened, but I didn't let it show. "You don't have to choose," I said. "You can have both." She shook her head. "That's not how it feels. There's history with you, memories. With him, there's just a name." I didn't realize I'd been holding my breath until I exhaled. "Then maybe the name isn't what matters," I said quietly. The porch light flickered on as the last bit of sunlight disappeared. She leaned back in her chair, legs tucked under her like she used to when she was little. "Do you ever think we can get back to what we were?" she asked. I thought about that for a long time. "No," I said finally. "But maybe we can get to something honest. That's worth more." She nodded slowly, her eyes glinting in the warm light. "I'd like that." Over the next few weeks, we fell into a kind of rhythm again. She'd come over for Sunday dinners, sometimes bringing a friend or two, filling the house with laughter I hadn't heard in years. Claire cooked, I grilled, Emma told stories about work or the people she met in town. It felt almost normal, almost like the years of silence and anger had been a bad dream. And yet, even as I laughed, part of me couldn't forget the nights I'd sat alone in the dark, reading those messages over and over. Healing doesn't erase memory. It just teaches you how to live with it. One Sunday evening after everyone left, Emma lingered behind. She helped me stack chairs on the porch and then stood quietly for a while, looking at the sky. "I used to hate this house," she said suddenly. "After I found out, every wall felt like a lie." "I know." She looked at me. "But now it feels like the only place that makes sense." I smiled a little. Maybe that's because it's home, no matter what. She hesitated, then said, "You know, when I was little, I used to tell my friends that my dad could fix anything." I laughed softly. "I remember. You gave me a reputation I couldn't live up to." She smiled back. "Maybe you did. You fixed this, didn't you?" I didn't answer right away. The truth is I hadn't fixed anything. I just refused to let it stay broken. But I let her believe that was enough. Maybe I did. She stepped forward then and hugged me again. Longer this time. No hesitation, no tension,
just warmth. "I love you, Dad," she whispered. And though I dreamed of hearing those words again, when they finally came, I couldn't speak. I just held her, the same way I did 15 years ago when she was small and thought I could protect her from anything. After she left that night, I sat alone on the porch long after the lights went out, listening to the crickets and the far-off hum of the highway. I thought about everything we'd survived, the lies, the anger, the distance, and realized that sometimes love isn't about who shares your blood. It's about who stays, who keeps showing up when everything falls apart, who loves you even when it hurts. I finished my coffee, looked up at the night sky, and whispered, "You're still my girl." The stars didn't answer, but I didn't need them to. Somewhere out there, she knew.
Autumn came with that familiar chill that creeps under doors and reminds you that time keeps moving whether you're ready or not. The trees turned gold, the air smelled like wood smoke, and the garden Claire planted back in spring began to fade into brown. But inside the house, things finally felt warm again. Emma started stopping by just to talk, sometimes with no reason at all. She'd sit at the kitchen counter scrolling on her phone while I cooked, or lean against the doorway teasing me about how slow I chopped vegetables. It was ordinary in the best possible way, like the kind of peace you don't notice until you remember what chaos used to sound like. One Saturday, she brought a photo album she'd made. She said it was for old times' sake. We sat together flipping through the pages, her baby pictures, birthdays, the family trips we'd taken before everything shattered. "You kept all these," she said. I nodded. I couldn't throw them away. She smiled faintly. "I'm glad you didn't." Then she turned to a photo I hadn't seen in years. Her 5th birthday, frosting on her face, me kneeling beside her, both of us laughing. She traced the picture with her thumb and whispered, "That's real." I looked at her, surprised. "What do you mean?" "I mean," she said, "that even if everything else was a lie, that moment wasn't. None of it was fake for you. And I think that matters more than I wanted to admit." I didn't realize how much I needed to hear that until then. My throat burned, but I forced a smile. "It matters to me too," I said. She looked up, met my eyes, and for a second, everything, the secrets, the betrayal, the years lost, seemed to fall away. She wasn't the angry teenager who'd looked at me like I was a stranger. She was my daughter again. Not by blood, but by everything else that counts. As weeks passed, Claire seemed to fade into the background of this new version of our lives. She was quieter, more careful, watching us from a distance. One night after Emma left, she asked, "Do you think she'll ever forgive me?" I thought about that for a long time. "Maybe," I said finally, "but forgiveness isn't something you ask for, it's something you earn." Claire nodded, eyes wet. "Do you think I've earned it yet?" I looked at her, the woman I'd loved and lost in the same lifetime, and said softly, "Not yet, but you're still here. That's a start." A few days later, Emma invited us both to dinner at her apartment. I almost said no. I wasn't sure I was ready for the 3 of us to sit at the same table again, but she insisted. So we went. She'd cooked spaghetti, burned at the edges but still edible, and laughed at herself the entire time. She said, "Guess I didn't inherit your cooking skills." "You didn't inherit much from me," I joked, and then realized what I'd said. The silence that followed was heavy for a moment, but then she smiled gently. "Maybe I did." She said, "You taught me how to stay." That night, when we left her apartment, Claire squeezed my hand for the first time in years. Not in a romantic way, but as if to say, "We made it through." I didn't pull away. The drive home was quiet. Headlights cutting through the dark, the road stretching endlessly ahead of us. I thought about how far we'd come from that night in the kitchen when I found the messages, how much pain we'd caused and endured, and how, somehow, we were still standing. In the weeks that followed, life settled into something almost peaceful. I'd see Emma every weekend, sometimes helping her fix small things in her apartment, sometimes just sharing dinner and stories about our days. She started calling me Dad again, without hesitation,
as if the word had found its way back home. And every time she said it, a part of me, one I thought had died, came back to life. One evening, as I was about to leave her place, she stopped me at the door and said, "I've been thinking about changing my last name," she said. "Legally, I mean." I froze. "To what?" She smiled shyly. "To yours." I felt my heart stumble. "I didn't have to do that," I said. "Names don't change who we are." She smiled shyly. "I know, but I want it to show who I choose to be." I didn't have words. I just pulled her into a hug, and this time it wasn't the desperate, fragile kind we'd shared before. It was steady, full of quiet certainty. When I finally let go, I said, "You have no idea what that means to me." She smiled. "I think I do." That night, driving home, I realized that forgiveness doesn't always come in grand gestures or dramatic apologies. Sometimes it comes in small, simple moments. A smile across a table, a shared laugh, a name spoken without hesitation. Sometimes it just means surviving long enough to find your way back to each other.
Winter came again, softer this time, without the sharp edges of the year before. The house no longer felt like a museum of pain, but something living again, with warmth seeping back into its walls. Emma came home for the holidays. She brought gifts, laughter, and a kind of energy I hadn't felt in years. She moved through the house like she belonged there, because she did. Watching her talk with Claire in the kitchen, helping with decorations, humming along to songs on the radio, I realized how much I'd missed the sound of her voice filling the rooms. It was strange how something that once reminded me of betrayal now felt like forgiveness made audible. On Christmas Eve, after dinner, she handed me a small box wrapped in silver paper. "It's nothing big," she said, smiling nervously. I opened it and found a framed photo, one of the three of us from years ago, taken during a trip to the lake. On the back, she'd written, "For every day you chose to stay." I couldn't speak. The words hit me harder than I expected, small and simple, but full of everything we'd lost and somehow found again. I pulled her into a hug, and this time there were no tears, just silence, the kind that meant understanding. Later that night, when everyone was asleep, I sat by the tree with the lights blinking softly in the dark. I thought about the long road that had brought us here, the lies, the anger, the silence, and the slow, painful rebuilding. It hadn't been redemption, not exactly. It was something quieter, humbler, survival. Love reshaped, but still alive. I realized then that the truth hadn't destroyed us. It had stripped us bare, forced us to rebuild on something real, and somehow that made what we had now stronger than before. A few days after New Year's, Emma called to tell me her paperwork for the name change had gone through. "It's official," she said. "Emma Dawson." I closed my eyes and let the words sink in. "It suits you," I said, and she laughed. "Guess I finally inherited something after all." That laugh, the one that used to echo through the halls, was all the proof I needed that what we'd built wasn't gone, just different. Life moved forward quietly. Claire and I stayed together, though not in the same way. We didn't call it marriage anymore. We called it what it was, a friendship shaped by too many years and too much history to throw away. She found peace in her garden, I found mine in long drives and quiet evenings. We didn't need to fix everything. Some things just needed to rest. One afternoon in late spring, Emma and I went back to the overlook we'd visited that night when everything began to heal. The air was warm, the sky wide and endless. We stood there without speaking, just looking at the view that had seen both our worst and our best moments. "Do you ever think about that night?" she asked. "Every day," I said. She nodded, then smiled faintly. "Me too. I think it's when we both stop pretending." I turned to her, seeing the woman she'd become, strong and self-assured, but still the same girl who used to grab my hand when she crossed the street. "You know," I said quietly, If I could go back, if I knew the truth from the start, I'd still choose you." Her eyes softened, and she whispered, "I know. That's why you're my dad." We stood there for a long time, the wind carrying the scent of wildflowers and the faint echo of laughter from somewhere far below. For the first time in what felt like forever, I wasn't haunted by what we'd lost. I was grateful for what we still had. When we finally walked back to the car, she slipped her arm through mine like she used to when she was small and said, "Let's go home." And this time, the word home didn't hurt. It felt right. It felt earned. Because in the end, love isn't about the blood you share. It's about the life you build, the promises you keep, and the people who stay even after the truth tries to break you. And no matter what the world said, no matter what DNA proved or didn't, she was my daughter. She always would be.